From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. President Nicolás Maduro in Venezuela has been campaigning in the northern state of Carabobo, where he's been greeted by large crowds. The campaign officially launched on Monday with a message of peace, economic prosperity, and social protection for an independent Venezuela. President Maduro also spoke about his plan for a monetary conversion that will begin on June 4th as an important tool to overcome the economic war.
Maduro has been fighting against this economic war that they are waging. Every day it's like a bottleneck. They keep closing the opportunities to try to make us Venezuelans desperate, to make us to take to the streets to protest with violence, to kill each other for food and for medicines. But I am still supporting this revolution because this revolution opened up so many opportunities for us. This revolution took so many more Venezuelans into account and gave us education.
Our correspondent Madeleine Garcia tells us more from Carabobo.
We are here in Carabobo, covering the campaigns of Venezuela presidential candidates. Over the next 26 days, candidates will present their plans to the people. On Tuesday, President and candidate Nicolás Maduro did just that here in Carabobo. Earlier, while campaigning in the southern state of Tamacuro, Maduro talked about all the electoral guarantees and audits included in the process, in front of an audience of both Bolivarian Revolution representatives and opposition members, who have decided to take part in the May 20 elections. The electoral process also has national and international observers. The software for the modernized electoral system has been truly tested, and guarantees have been signed and strengthened by the government and those competing in the elections. The government has been encouraging people to go out and vote, telling them that this is the only way to solve their differences. They are also calling on people to take part in peaceful public debates and asking them to not be afraid of doing so. Also being discussed here are the wild accusations against the country that some members of the opposition have made internationally, even asking other countries to start blockades against Venezuela. They talk about a humanitarian crisis while also asking for tougher sanctions. Nicolás Maduro has been talking about this with the people and pointed out the contradiction. This is all we can tell you for now. We will bring you more as the campaign develops.
That was Madeleine Garcia from Venezuela. Earlier, in the far eastern state of Delta Amacuro, President Maduro criticized the proposals of the opposition candidate Henry Falcón to dollarize the Venezuelan economy.
Hay que seguir luchando por la independencia económica, monetaria.
We must continue fighting for economic and monetary independence, and only with our own instruments, our own efforts, our own currency, Venezuela will be able to take the path to actual prosperity with equality and social justice. That is my response to the candidate for the presidency, Henry Falcón. I think he's very extremely mistaken, very badly advised. And the Venezuelan people are going to punish him on May 20th. Because on May 20th, we will achieve a great victory, and the people will decide if they want the dollar or the bolivar. I am certain that they will vote for the bolivar.
Y el pueblo decidirá si quiere el dólar o el bolívar.
Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza was at the United Nations for a high-level meeting on peace building. He said the tools that the UN has should be used to prevent conflicts and not to interfere in the domestic affairs of the states.
The movement of non-aligned countries underscores the fact that there cannot be development without peace, and no peace without development. Therefore, we must work together and double our efforts and improve synergies between peacekeeping and peace-building activities, as appropriate to attain the overall objective of sustaining peace. The movement of non-aligned countries is fundamentally committed to peace-building and sustaining peace.
And also the President of Colombia, Juan Manuel Santos, addressed the UN. He said that they were proud to be able to share their history of conflict in the hope that it could bring a better future.
Not only for ourselves, but for all humankind. sharing our history so that it can be useful for other parts of the planet who are suffering from the hardships of war. We are convinced that putting an end to armed conflicts, even the most complex ones, is possible.
We have done this, convinced that putting it in.
Let's go to our correspondent Karina Cartagena, who has more from the UN in New York.
Hello, greetings from New York. In this high-level meeting, the President of the UN General Assembly called today to put prevention in the first place to avoid the escalation of conflicts in the world. Sustainable peace is not something that can be done at the UN and delivered to countries in need. Cooperation among all is needed, he said. The Secretary General of the United Nations said that in order to avoid conflicts, more mediation as well more democracy and dialogue are necessary. At this meeting, the President of Colombia, Juan Manuel Santos, pointed out that drug trafficking continues to be the first threat to peace in his country. The Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jorge Arriaza, on behalf of NAM, said to the international community that it is important to preserve peace, which should be a UN priority, and the NAM will not stop efforts in maintaining peace around the world.
That was Karina Cartagena from New York. Cardinal Leopoldo Brenes will mediate the dialogue between the government of Nicaragua, the private sectors, and workers' group. The announcement comes after a week of protest initially sparked by proposed reforms to the social security system. Cardinal Brenes asked for each side to avoid violence in order for the talks to work.
Nicaragua's Episcopal Conference, after praying and listening and asking for direction from the Holy Spirit, accepts the role of mediator and witness of the dialogue requested by President of Nicaragua, Daniel Ortega Saavedra. To ease the climate for dialogue, we believe it's essential and mandatory that the government, as well as each member of civil society, avoids any kind of violence.
One of the two police officers killed during the protests have been buried in her hometown, Jinotepe, near the Pacific coast. Officer Juana Aguilar Cano was just 19 years old. Demonstrations have left at least 10 dead and hundreds injured.
It's really sad for a human life to be lost in this way. The loss of an innocent life like this is dreadful. The police were simply doing their job, carrying out their functions and safeguarding the country.
And around the country, people have held vigils to commemorate those who died in the protests. People organized prayer chains around the country to ask for an end to the violence in Nicaragua, as well as peace and stability. In Paraguay, opposition supporters held a rally outside the Superior Court of Electoral Justice in the capital, Asunción. They protest the alleged electoral fraud on Sunday's presidential election, in which the Colorado Party and its candidate, Mario Abdo Benítez, was elected. His opponent, Efrain Alegre, lost in a race that was closer than expected, as he was just behind 3 points. More popular mobilizations are expected in the coming days in response to the mounting fraud allegations. Opposition leader in Paraguay, Efrain Alegre, announced that his party is going to check every ballot sheet and every vote to prove what he said was an electoral fraud. Via Twitter, Alegre already showed a voting paper where his party, Alianza, was given 0 votes when it actually got 65. Former Paraguayan President Fernando Lugo is collaborating with Alegre in order to clarify the situation.
We are asking the international community for help. We are already talking with observers from the European Union. Here we have their preliminary report, same with the Organization of American States. What people are asking for, what we are simply asking for, is to have a clean electoral process. What we want is transparency and a strong electoral process in Paraguay. And I don't think this is asking for something out of the ordinary.
And Ecuador's National Assembly has approved the creation of a special commission to address security concerns on its border.
The National Assembly approved the creation of an occasional commission to discuss the situation on the border. The special commission will be made up of 19 lawmakers who will have 19 days to reform laws that concern the border areas.
The creation of a special commission in charge of the border security controlled by the National Assembly. The borderline with Colombia needs permanent patrolling and protection.
Politicians are supporting the ruling, but also highlight that the government hasn't provided much information and that action to address the current situation is necessary.
There are things that need to be clarified, like where are the bodies of the kidnapped journalists? We deserve to know the truth. We don't know anything about the couple which was presumably kidnapped. We don't know what the next steps are that the government will take in order to save them.
Meanwhile, the families of the 3 kidnapped journalists who were kidnapped and murdered at the northern border with Colombia have traveled to Washington, D.C. in the United States to meet with international organizations.
We need a special disciplinary commission to verify all the proceedings and measures taken by the government in this shameful situation, and we need international assistance along with the governments of Ecuador and Colombia.
For Ecuadorians, this situation is still new. They are demanding prompt answers about the bodies of the 3 journalists and another couple who were recently kidnapped at the border. Denise Herrera, Telesur, Quito, Ecuador.
We'll take a short break now, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. Outrage continues in Mexico after police announced they found the bodies of the 3 film students who had been missing for a month in the western state of Jalisco. Demonstrators say they don't believe the official version of events and also criticize the authorities' decision to place fences in the streets to stop protests. Police say the students were killed and doused with acid by members of the New Generation Jalisco cartel. Some argue the murders will be used to influence the outcome of the elections. And in between disappearances and violence, Mexican citizens feel less and less secure every day in their own cities.
Going out on the streets or using public transportation have become risky activities for Mexicans. According to a poll made by the National Statistics and Geography Institute, 9 out of 10 citizens expressed fear of moving around their own cities.
There is more crime and violence now. My son was robbed outside our own house.
You feel watched. They check what you're carrying. You can't feel safe.
Cops don't make you feel safe, even when they're around.
President Enrique Peña Nieto admits his policies have failed.
These are the failures and lessons that these policies have left us. They are still not correct and haven't worked as we expected.
Social organizations highlight the negative effects the government's strategies for the military and the police have had.
We went to war with Mexico's rule of law by implementing an absurd war against drug trafficking that has collapsed this country, that has weakened every institution. The worst is that we still don't want to face up to it.
This issue is on every candidate's agenda for the coming election, but with very different tones.
There is only one candidate, left-wing Andrés Manuel López Obrador, who proposes to end this routine of reacting to violence with more violence.
According to the Statistics Institute, Mexicans feel more insecure each year. This after more than 10 years of the so-called war against drug trafficking, which has left more than 200,000 dead and 33,000 missing.
In Peru, a judge has ordered the detention of 2 men allegedly involved in the killing of a Canadian citizen. The victim was murdered in a small village in the Peruvian Amazon after he was accused of murdering a local healer, Olivia Arevalo. His body was found last Sunday, while Arevalo was shot dead last week. Peruvian police say they are looking for evidence to solve both murders. The Freeland indigenous camp in Brasilia is into its 3rd day, with conflicts over ancestral lands at the center of the protest. Our correspondent Mia Alberti has been talking to some of those directly affected by the violence.
Quereshui Shapiri is a member of the Guarani people from southern Brazil. Last year, her mother was attacked during her sleep and her hands were cut off.
They cut across her face, her eye, part of her ear. They cut across her forehead, her head, and then her hand. They cut it. She lost almost all of her blood. It was a miracle she survived.
Quereshu's story is just one of hundreds of cases. The attack stems from the complicated centuries-long issue of land disputes. While industries and agribusinesses try to expand their exploitation of the land, the indigenous groups try to stop them. This week, 3,000 people are camped out here in Brasilia to demand the government take action and create a Brazil for all Brazilians.
Violence, fear, despair, all of this because the Brazilian state prioritizes the agribusiness, mining or energy interests, instead of these people who have been for more than 500 years. The Brazilian state needs to realize that it serves society and not some economic interests.
Brazil has more than 1,200 indigenous territories, but only 30% are registered, and even in those cases, the law is often not respected.
Day and night, the Amazon is trespassed by miners, prospectors for land interests, because our politicians are not following the laws, which they are obliged to follow.
For 5 days and 5 nights, the Free Land Camp will seek more land demarcation, more government intervention, and less violence. Mia Alberti in Brasilia.
In Barbados, opposition leader Mia Mottley continues calls for Prime Minister Freundel Stewart to set the date for elections. Mottley, who's the head of the Barbados Labour Party, said in an open letter to the Prime Minister that the country is crumbling and grinding to a halt because of his tardiness, indecisiveness and inertia. Barbados Parliament dissolved in March and elections must be held before June 4th. But the Prime Minister shows no sign of calling the date.
Prime Minister, our country is drifting and our people are suffering. Our institutions are reeling. Problems abound and you appear indifferent to the realities of the plight of our people. Our condition is just getting worse. I am not even minded to speculate now as to what these 90 days are really all about. You and your cabinet are not attempting to solve any problems. I'm asking you, sir, in the name of all that is good and righteous, call the election.
At the beginning of this week, the government in St. Lucia announced an increase in fuel prices. They will now be set by a new system based on changes in international oil prices. The minister in the office of the Prime Minister, Dr. Ubaldus Raymond, says the taxes from fuel will be used for much-needed roadworks.
So we as a government, as I said earlier, we said that in spite of these increases, we need the revenues to fix our roads because we have an ambitious road rehabilitation and maintenance program, and we'll ensure that we will undertake that program.
The World Bank says remittance flows into Latin America and the Caribbean grew by 8.7% in 2017. In 2018, the World Bank said remittances to the region are expected to grow by 4.3%. That's an increase from $80 billion last year to $83 billion this year. The report says the main reasons for the increase were stronger growth in the United States and tighter enforcement of U.S. immigration rules, since migrants sent more money home in anticipation of shorter stays in the United States. We'll take one last short break, but join us after another look at what our multimedia team has to report. Welcome back. Another judge in the United States has ordered the Trump administration to restore the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA. A judge in the District of Columbia, John Bates, described the decision to cancel the scheme as arbitrary and capricious. He also asked the government to accept new applications. Judges from New York and San Francisco had also ordered authorities to keep the scheme going. In September last year, President Donald Trump had announced the ending of the program, which lets young, undocumented immigrants stay in the country. And Trump and his French counterpart, Emmanuel Macron, have discussed a possible new agreement on Iran's nuclear program. During their meeting in Washington, Macron suggested new negotiations aimed at curbing Iran's military power and activities in the region. The new deal will also include Iran's ballistic missile program and its role in Syria. Trump has called the existing Iran agreement the worst deal ever and threatened to cancel it. Iran's President Hassan Rouhani dismissed the talk of a new deal and expressed his anger at the U-turn by the U.S. government on this agreement.
U.S. President Donald Trump says this deal is a very bad deal. Well, if it's a very bad deal, then why did the U.S. government sign it? Trump says this is a very dangerous deal. If that's the case, then did your predecessors not understand anything? Are you the discoverer of all bad things? You don't have any background in politics. You don't have any background in law. You don't have any background on international treaties.
A fire at an oil well in Indonesia has taken at least 15 lives. Here's more on that and other big stories from around the world.
A fire at an oil well in Aceh in northwest Indonesia has killed at least 15 people and injured 40 others. Firefighters reached the site but struggled to put out the blaze. The fire broke out early on Wednesday after a well overflowed as residents gathered to collect oil. Hundreds of staff from the e-commerce giant Amazon have called for better working conditions. They are demonstrating in Berlin, where the mega group's founder Jeff Bezos is receiving a prize. The prize, given by the publisher of the German newspaper Das Bild, rewards innovation in business. But the choice of Bezos has met with anger among unions and some politicians.
It is not possible that in these times of digital innovation, some still believe that human beings have no value, no rights, and no collective agreement.
The opposition party of Democratic Republic of Congo has held a massive rally in the capital Kinshasa to mark the 20th anniversary of multi-party politics in the country. Tension has been brewing in Democratic Republic of Congo as President Joseph Kabila refuses to step down even though his second term in office expired in 2016. A loophole in the constitution has allowed him to remain in power until now.
And with that, we come to the end of this news brief. This and many other stories, as you know, you can find them on our website, telesurtv.net/English. And you can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.
Our actions have an impact on the environment. It's our responsibility